Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the Town of Islip Planning Board for Wednesday, September 7th. Just some housekeeping matters. If you're an applicant here to present this evening, we remind you to please keep your applications to 30 minutes or less. If you're a member of the community who'd like to speak, we ask you to keep your comments to 3 minutes or less. We'll remind you on the time as time goes on. I'm going to ask everyone to please stand for the pledge. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic which stands one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. If the item is marked public hearing next to it on your agenda, that means you are welcome to speak. We ask you to fill out a yellow card in the back and just bring it up front. We'll call on you during that public hearing. If it's not marked public hearing, the public hearing was already held, and you're welcome to stay for the vote on the item. First item on the agenda, site plan modification, public hearing, John King, SP 2021-077, south side of Veterans Memorial Highway, State Route 454, 197 feet west of Fifth Avenue, Bohemia, 3040 Veterans Memorial Highway. Applicant requested buffer and parking relaxation in connection with the construction of 2 warehouse office buildings and related site improvements. Good evening.
Good evening to the board. My name is Joseph Clemens, a partner within the firm German & Clemens Architecture, PC, located at 3275 Veterans Memorial Highway, Suite B11, Ronkonkoma, New York, 11779. To reiterate, I am speaking to you this evening in regards to the approximate 3.81 acre parcel situated on the south side of Veterans Memorial Highway. We had last made a presentation to the planning board with regard to this property back on July 21st of 2021 in connection with a requested change of zone from Business 3 to Industrial Corridor District, which included a request for a special permit for warehouse use and associated parking relaxations. With the planning board recommendation, we proceeded to the town board and was granted approval on August 12th of 2021. The requested change of zone was recorded with the necessary departments and has an effective date of April 10th of 2022. During the review process, it was recommended and encouraged that the applicant pursue the abandonment of the southern portion of Charles Street, which is adjacent to the rear of our site. All the necessary approvals were obtained by various departments within the town. After diligent efforts, however, the property owner was informed via the title company that they do not have interest in this property, impacting the initial design which was presented. As a result of this determination, we are before you this evening requesting a buffer and parking relaxation in connection with the construction of 2 office and warehouse buildings and the related site improvements, similar to that of the initial application. The proposed buffer is approximately 30 feet in depth and contains a double row of screen plantings of varying species, as well as a row of trees spaced 20 feet on center of varying species as well, per the recommendation of the Town of Islip Engineering Department and in compliance with the Town of Islip subdivision and land development regulations. Also proposed is an 8-foot high masonry sound attenuation wall with evergreens planted on each side as required within the Town of Islip zoning code section 68-482.1 in an attempt to strategically block possible views from the residences to the south as well as assist with any potential noise from the site. The buffer relaxation request is to accommodate a slight pavement encroachment near the proposed refuse enclosure. Presently, the revised site plan complies with front yard landscaping at 10.1%, and the total landscape area excluding the buffer is at 22.7%. With the buffer area included, 30.8% of the overall site is to be landscaped. It should be noted that one of the objectives within the Industrial Corridor District is to enhance the aesthetic of the roadways by means of landscaping, lot area, frontage, and architectural quality. The plan proposed would remain consistent with the intent of the ICD zoning criteria as demonstrated. In order to accommodate the buffer as indicated, additional parking has been removed from plan. A total of 91 car spaces are provided on site, while approximately 102.4 spaces are required, thus a request of relaxation for 12 cars, which equates to approximately 11.6%. These calculations were performed conservatively while analyzing the tenant spaces and their breakdown between office and warehouse. Less parking may inevitably be required, however, would not impact the proposed calculations too dramatically. So the board is aware, my client, Mr. John King, on behalf of Great River Enterprises 2LC, had been provided with a draft site covenants and conditions per the Town of Islip Planning Department for review. The client was in agreement with those conditions set forth and as such promptly executed them for submission to the Town of Islip's Planning Department for their records. Lastly, it is understood that the purpose of the ICD district is to promote high-quality development and redevelopment and enhance the area's success as a premier industrial and office district. It was established with the intent to provide opportunities for successful and sustainable growth within the district in an attempt to improve the town of Islip's gateway to MacArthur Airport. This proposal presented before you continues to request the consideration for a redevelopment of a site which contained two vacant, dilapidated, and underutilized buildings and converted into a much improved site which includes two separate buildings, one at approximately 30,000 square feet, and another at 18,630 square feet, which is an FAR of approximately 29.7, which is under the permitted 35%. As you can clearly see, my client simply wishes to establish and maintain a property which conforms with the general intent of the town of Islip, which what they had when preparing the industrial corridor district's regulations, while also providing something which contextually fits in with the surrounding area. The improvements requested will become a benefit to the community and enhance the aesthetic of Veterans Memorial Highways corridor, and this proposal will be a vast improvement from that of the blighted vacant property which presently exists there today, and will likely be a great improvement from previous uses which has previously occupied the site. As such, we would respectfully request that you grant the proposed relaxations so that my client can convert this eyesore of a site into a pleasant neighbor and can continue to enhance the Bohemia community. I'd like to thank you for your time, and of course, if you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer.
We're going to go to public hearing, then staff report, and I'll just leave you with one thought. If you've been to enough of these meetings with me as chairman, I noticed you have the dumpster in the buffer, and their residences behind the property. So just be a question that's be coming up when we come back on.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to go to Richard Bonacore. Come on up to the microphone.
Yes, I would like to discuss the soundproof wall that's at the south side of the property. It's located between buildings O and building K. I understand it's masonry. How high is that wall going to be?
I'll get you the answer from the staff shortly. Just give me all your questions for the record, and then we'll come back with them.
Well, that's my main question. If it's not high and it's not going to block noise. You know, what we're mainly interested in is reducing truck noise, you know, especially as they back into the spaces in those two buildings where the wall, you know, forms a barrier. And if you don't have a barrier, you're going to get noise into the development. And that's my main concern.
Thank you. I thank you for raising that. I have two concerns. One is the dumpster and one is the wall, and we're going to discuss that shortly. So thank you for coming and speaking on it also. If you want to come on up and speak and then fill it out afterwards. Just state your name for the record and just please fill one out afterwards so we have it. Thank you.
So one of my questions was that the original plans said they were going to take care of all the woods behind our houses between theirs. And is it going to be two buffers or one? Is it going to be 30 feet to my property or is it going to be 55 feet to my property?
We'll explain during staff report what happened with the street and with the size of the buffers.
And then they're obviously adding parking in the middle of the units against the back of the properties. Now, is this going to be a drive around parking lot where you could drive around all the buildings? Or is it just going to be down the center lane?
You'll see it right there in the middle.
No, I see, but you can't really tell. It shows parking spot here.
No, the way it's designed, I'll ask them to speak to that, but you can. I'll show you that.
Yeah, and then, again, like I said, the vegetation, what are they going to do with that?
Thank
I
you.
think Ron wants to talk. So
Yep, just come on up and just please fill out a yellow card before you leave. Thank you. They're in the table in the back. Just before you leave, if you can hand one in. Thank you.
My name is Debra Stoll. Maiden name Mueller. I'm in one of the properties behind. Our biggest concern, we lived many years with the bus company back there, and the backup beepers, which started at 4:30 in the morning every day and went till midnight at night. There was no getting rid of that noise. We've lived with it for years, filed many complaints, and couldn't do anything about it. So the noise is the biggest thing, and the trucks and the hours of the trucking. I understand truckers like to get out of the area quickly and early morning before traffic, but that is a very big problem for all of us. All our bedrooms are on the back side of the homes. So that is why we're all concerned about this buffer and also hours of backup beeping with these trucks and where the trucks are going to be located and the traffic back there.
Thank you. We'll
Thank
address those
you.
concerns.
Thank you.
Come on up, sir.
My name is Ron Stoll. On the first plan, they show the wall, but on the second plan, it does not show the wall. The wall is out. I have prints that show the first plan, and I have the new wall does not show masonry wall.
It's on the plan that we have. It's on that one also.
It shows it.
Yeah, it does. Yeah. It's a wall. We'll address that as well. So it's on the record. Is there anyone else who did not fill out a card that wishes to be heard on this application? Not seeing anyone else, I'm going to ask Mr. Gonzalez to give us a report, and then we'll come back for questions.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. This ICD zoned 3.8 acre property was the subject of CZ 2021-010. It's TC 5374, which changed the property zone from business 3 to ICD and replaced the non-conforming bus yard fleet with newly proposed warehouse and office buildings. As part of that change of zone, a 30-foot buffer was required adjacent to any residential use or zone. At the time of that application, the proposal included the abandonment of the adjacent paper road, Charles Street. That area would have been incorporated into the property and planted for the buffer. The road abandonment was approved and the change of zone granted. Subsequently, the title company discovered the subject property does not have rights to Charles Street and cannot abandon it. The site plan at this point has been modified to protect the intent of that grant while still providing the same benefits of a buffer. The full 30-foot buffer with the required 8-foot high sound attenuation wall is still being provided, the same as it was in the change of zone application, with the only buffer reduction being a slight pavement angle near the refuse enclosure on the east side. To accomplish this, the row of parking stalls that were previously proposed in between those two buildings were removed. This does now require a parking relaxation. However, the trade-off of buffer versus additional parking does have merit. So staff has prepared conditions which the applicant has granted, but there may be some questions that staff can answer if the board has any other comments.
Thank you. So I guess for the applicant, first is the buffer having the dumpster inside of it.
The dumpster is not actually inside of it. The dumpster is set outside of that setback. So you have 30 feet to the property line.
How many feet to the property line?
It's realistically to the buildings, it's about 30 foot too. The dumpster is outside of the 30-foot setback. Literally, the only thing that encroaches into it is if you want to claim it to be a handicapped pedestrian access, it's so a person can physically walk to the gate and get to it, but the dumpster itself is not within.
So you have the required without counting Charles Street.
What's up?
Without counting Charles Street?
Yes. So without Charles Street, you have 25 feet, and then you have, Charles Street itself is about 25.3 feet, and then we're proposing 30 feet on top of.
Okay, so it's slightly outside of it.
Yes, yes. The dumpster enclosure is outside of it. It's literally just a pedestrian area so somebody can get to it. And it is behind the wall, so you have double means.
You know, my opinion on that is that the dumpster be moved away from the residences. Where you can move it to, I don't know, but you certainly there's enough room. There's enough room on the property to move that dumpster away from the residences. That's my one concern there. The height of the sound wall that was raised by Mr. Boncourt is a concern that I have. Is the height is 8 feet? What is the height of the roll down doors and the height of a
I
tractor
believe
trailer?
they were 10 feet. So, I mean, any truck would have to be less than that. Anything higher than 8 feet would require Board of Appeals approvals. And 8 feet is what was recommended to us initially before going to the board for our first approval.
I would be willing to support it at 10 feet, which covers the height of the doors, which is saying that raised noise. We heard from the neighbors that there is noise out there. It's not a significant increase.
Yeah, I don't have
Something
an
that-
objection, but it would require staff to go before the board.
Can you just confirm the parking that, as the one question that came up, I don't have a car your name on it, but that there is no parking around the buildings, it's just, no driving around the
You
buildings?
cannot access around the building. Literally, that was a concern that was, I guess, came up during the initial set of boards. Literally, the landscaping cuts it off. You can't get around the building other than pedestrians.
And right now, the hours of operation are restricted till the covenants are 5:30 a.m. to 10 p.m.
Whatever the initial conditions were, is what it was.
Okay. I want to go to further questions from the board. Mr. Frugieri?
I just have one clarification for staff and then one question for the applicant. For staff, I just want to make sure I understand this correctly. This site plan is basically an approved site plan with the exception of an angle in this parking area right here?
So the previous buffer, the sound wall is essentially at the start of the buffer, and now it's a little bit.
It's set back.
But
It's
it's
set
still providing the same double row of evergreens, deciduous trees, the same wall. All of that stuff.
Okay. And then for the applicant, this plan shows a sound attenuation wall. Right now on the plan, it's showing 8 feet. I'm sure that's subject to debate. But the plantings, what type of plantings is?
We followed the recommendation that the engineering department had, so they were varying. I don't know them offhand, but literally they were a mix of species per their recommendations that it provided enough buffer and sound attenuation. I know some of the people within their department had specific requests, but the trees vary by species as well as these small double row of plantings. It's not just arborvitaes; they're spread out with different types of variety.
Because I know
Per
in
their
my
staff.
backyard, years ago, I planted 6-foot arborvitaes and now they're 20 feet.
Yes.
So the 20 feet dense arborvitaes would, or the like.
Yeah, we followed what
would
their
probably
recommendation
create
was.
a better buffer than the wall itself, too.
Exactly, over a period of time. And keep in mind too, because we couldn't get the portion of road, there's 25 feet of basically natural buffer that's there presently that, as far as we're aware of, no one can touch. So at least that's what was basically relayed to us. So that means there's 25 feet of natural property that can't be developed, and then an additional 30 feet of ours, which also includes then that retaining wall as part of. So not only will you have our 30 feet of plantings, but also the wall that's inside of it, and then the 25 feet behind us.
I'd just like to, in this application, specify what type of plantings that are going to be there.
We can
Number
give-
one.
we can
because
give a list
Let
of-
me just finish,
Sorry.
because my concern is not to just put in plantings today. I want a planting that's going to grow and improve the sound attenuation as the years go on.
That makes sense. That's
All
fine.
right,
I
something that
would-
will grow and make the situation even better as years go on.
Yes.
So that's one thing that I would like to see. And then also a condition that requires that buffer be maintained in perpetuity, not just planted, so that if trees die, they have to be replaced. Okay, good. It's in the covenants.
It's
Okay.
already in the covenants. Are there further questions from the board? The applicant like to add anything further?
No, my partner just said that all the plantings around the wall were supposed to be a minimum of 15-foot mature height, but we'll provide a planting list to planning and take their recommendation as well.
If there's nothing further from the board, I would, oh, Mr. Brown.
Yeah, I would just like to know, I mean, the chairman did mention to relocate on the 3 acres, relocate the dumpster. And also, he mentioned the height of the wall. And I'd just like to know the applicant's thoughts on those.
The wall would require a Board of Appeals approval. Depending on further developments, we may have to go there regardless. So it would be open to the property owner, which I don't think he'd have objection to. Unfortunately, he's not here this evening. He had a procedure done earlier today. In regards to the dumpster location, we'll have to review it and see where it can go. Just because at this point in time, it was outside the buffer area. And again, there's literally basically 55 feet of plantings in that spot, as well as our 8-foot wall or 10-foot wall, whatever have you. Yeah, and there's also, that's the second dumpster of 2. There's one for each building theoretically.
Because, well, just to cut you a little bit short, I could support this tonight, subject to the wall height and the dumpster being relocated away from the residents.
And again, obviously, the wall height is subject to Board of Appeals approval.
Yes, yes.
Right.
Just because you agreed, if they don't approve it, it's not approved.
I'm sure we can come up with something.
Right, and when it went to the Board of Appeals, it'd be a recommendation from the planning board also.
Mhm. I'm just trying to look of other spots we could put the dumpster location without altering more parking and having to come back before you once again. Because we do have one dumpster enclosure that towards the, I guess, northwest portion of the smaller building.
Well, it could be relocated with planning staff approval.
Can we do
I
so?
mean, we
Can we
could
do
make,
some work with them?
yeah, could it be a double dumpster at the existing
That's a
location?
possibility, but like I said, then we're gonna probably lose one more parking stall, which then modifies what we have here. So as long as it can be done with planning staff approval, then we're willing to work.
All right, that being said, is there a motion?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, I would make a motion to grant the application tonight, subject to the retaining wall going to a 10-foot height. Obviously, it has to go to the Board of Appeals, and also with the relocation to the dumpster to the existing dumpster site now, which is making it a double site. And obviously, I'm making this on the planning staff's report.
And I can I just clarify, is it if the Board of Appeals does not agree to grant the 10-foot, that they're still approved at the 8-foot?
Yes.
Mr. Frugari?
Mr. Brown, I'd like to request an amendment to that motion to also include the landscaping, so that the planted species are such that will grow to higher than a 15-foot mature height. And that's subject to, that's at the planning staff's recommendation.
Mr. Fajori, I'm going to accept that and add it to the motion.
There is a motion right now by Mr. Brown to grant the application subject to the 8-foot retaining wall going to 10 feet, assuming that we get the approval from the Board of Appeals. If the Board of Appeals does not approve that, it is approved at 8-foot. They're moving the dumpster away from the buffer to somewhere else on the property, working that with planning staff. It may require, obviously, the parking spot. And then finally, the amendment of Mr. Frugari, which is that the plantings be at least a 15-foot height at maturity. Is that correct? Exceed 15-foot height at maturity. Is there a second to that motion? Second by Mr. Bruno. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? The motion is granted.
Thank you again, gentlemen. Have a great night.
I had a question.
Yeah.
The planning staff.
I know if you still have a question, I'll give you the card of the planning staff member who handles it.
If you, yeah, I'll just. Which one? Okay.
That's why I left that planning.
Item 2 on the agenda, site plan modification, public hearing, Ryan Brown, Union Boulevard Realty LLC, SP 2022-025, south side of Union Boulevard, County Route 50, 374 feet east of Beach Street, West Islip, 460 Union Boulevard. Applicant requests a parking relaxation in connection with the expansion of an existing hardware store and a multi-tenant shopping center. Good evening.
Good evening, Chairman, members of the board. Richard M. Bavone, 308 East Meadow Avenue, East Meadow, appearing as the agent for the owner. Ryan Brown is with me tonight. He's the authorized agent for the owners for the Union Boulevard Realty LLC. I also have with me tonight Jeff Lazarczyk of R&M Engineering. They prepared the traffic study, which was submitted to the board. Also, Michael Costello, which is the CEO of Ace Hardware, and Rocky Vitale is a manager of that store itself, the Ace Hardware. I'll try to make this as short as possible. And what we're looking for is just a relaxation in parking. The Ace Hardware has been there for 20 years, approximately, in the same center. The space that they're going to take over is the bank abutting it, so they'll just move the tenant separation and build out when the building department issues a permit for an interior alteration. We're not requesting for any changes in the configuration of the parking lot itself that's there now that has been approved by the town. We will be requesting, if we can, from the board that they will be putting a container in the parking lot for a short period of time for construction materials. If and when that this board and the building department were to approve the application, just for a period of, I believe, between 6 and 10 weeks, depending on what construction takes for the actual site, and then that will be removed. Ace Hardware became more of a essential services during COVID, and they needed the space. And now what they had before was a container outside to handle the public, be able to handle what was needed during COVID. And now that space will be the interior alteration. There'll be, in our opinion, there will be no adverse impact to this property and the surrounding properties. Again, property is going to remain the same, and we're requesting an approval. I do have our professional engineer, if the board has any questions in reference to the parking traffic study that we submitted.
Thank you. I have no cards. Anyone wish to be heard on this application? Not seeing anyone. I'm going to turn to Mr. Gonzalez for a report, then we'll come back for any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is a business 3 zone, 3.5 acre site, as stated by the applicant's representative, currently improved with an existing multi-tenant commercial building, which operates in conjunction with the adjacent sites to the east and west as a continuous shopping center along Union Boulevard. The applicant is proposing to expand the existing hardware store by occupying an adjacent unit, which is currently a vacant bank, which slightly increases the parking requirement for the site. 159 stalls are required, 117 are provided. Although the relaxation on paper is high, based on parking counts and ITE data by R&M Engineering, there's between a 41 to 49% occupancy on site. Those figures, coupled with shared parking between the adjacent properties, the request does have merit. So based on that, staff recommends the board grant the application subject to the attached conditions.
Thank you. Are there questions from the board? I don't have any. I shop in the store. I know it well. I know the shopping center well. You have the cross access, obviously, to where Stop and Shop is, which always has available parking spots. The permit that you asked about for the container, you'll have to talk to planning staff about. That's not subject to our approval, but if it's allowed in the code, they'll allow you to do it.
Understood.
Is
And
there a
just for the
motion?
record, we did submit the conditions, which were signed as requested.
Perfect. Is there a motion? Ms. Moriarty? It's a motion by Mr. Moriarty to grant the application subject to the attached conditions. Second by Ms. Frugieri. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Abstentions? The application is granted. Thank you.
Thank you very much and have a good evening.
Item 3 on the agenda, planning board application, public hearing, Lamont Monroe, PB 2022-021, east side of Central Boulevard, 60 feet north of Forest Place, Bay Shore, 1743 Central Boulevard. Applicant requests a modification of planning board conditions in connection with the encroachment of a pool, patio, and shed, and other continuances in natural buffer for filed map 11542. Good evening.
Good evening, Chairman and board members. I'm Lamont Monroe. This is my wife, Melissa Monroe, and my daughter, Natalia. Address 1743 Central Boulevard. Basically, we're first-time home buyers. We came from the city. We were unaware of the buffers and setbacks and those things of that nature. We did put in a shed, and the concrete pad was for my 2 Cane Corso dogs. I have a picture. And as you can see, the kennel is based on top of that so that they don't dig underneath the dirt and get out, because they are big dogs and they can get out, run around. However, we did put in a pool and a pool patio. The trees that were lined around where the pool is, we replaced with the arborvitaes. Lelands. 9 lelands. And on the other side of the fence where there was no vegetation, we planned on filling that whole side with more lelands and arborvitaes as far as the vegetation, and cover the pool equipment where the filter, etc. is. So I was here basically to ask, for the request of the modification from the board.
Thank you. So why don't we go to a staff report and then we'll come back for some questions. We have some questions for you. Okay. Is there anyone who wishes to be heard on this? I do not have any cards. Not seeing anyone, I'm going to turn to Mr. Gonzalez to give us a report.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This Residence B Zone quarter-acre site is currently improved with a single-family dwelling CO'd in 2013 Is lot number 2 on the map of Pine Air Estates, which is filed map number 11542, filed in 2007. Per that filed map, there is a required natural buffer that starts with the southerly side yard of this property and runs along the rear of every property in the development, other than lot number 13, which abuts the recharge basin. This particular lot has a 20-foot natural buffer along the side and a 15-foot along the rear. The request tonight is to maintain various encroachments within that natural buffer area, which was to remain undisturbed in perpetuity. The board has heard several similar applications such as this in the past, and all followed the same parameters as far as the relief that was granted and the mitigation that was required. In this case, staff proposes the following, which are outlined in the attached planning board conditions. Allow the pool equipment, and pool patio to remain. Remove the concrete pad and shed from the natural area. Plant mature arborvitae, a minimum 5 feet high, along the entirety of the rear yard and southerly side yard. This must shield the pool and pool equipment. The applicant will refer to Appendix F of the Tenavisa subdivision and land development regulations for appropriate evergreen trees that are labeled for buffer and screen plantings, and provide a proposal for staff review. After that, an engineering inspection will be required to verify that the plantings were done prior to the CO of the pool permit. So based on this, staff recommends the board grant the application subject to those attached conditions.
Have you been presented with those conditions? Are you in agreement with them?
Yeah, I just got them a little while before the meeting. I don't have a problem with the vegetation and moving the things out the way if that's the last resort. However, my like I said, the concrete pad, that was just to secure my dogs, and the shed was actually built on the property when I purchased it, so it would be like very, very hard to get that to move it, or I would have to just basically destroy the whole shed and throw it away. And where the shed was actually placed, none of the buffers or the trees were moved or cut down. I have pictures before and after, and you can see the same trees are still there around the shed.
So,
And
so from the planning staff's position on this, and certainly I agree with the planning staff on this, obviously part of the pool, part of the patio around the pool, all of the pool equipment, the concrete pad and the shed were all built not on your property, right? So it's on, the property is not yours that it was built on. The pool,
no, that is my property.
the buffer,
It's theirs.
it's,
It's the
Yeah, that's my backyard.
it's the required buffer.
Mhm.
You're inside the required buffer. You can't build in that part of it. I'm going to rephrase that. So we're willing to let you keep the pool equipment, and the patio for the pool, which would be the most expensive things to obviously redo. So we're, as much as you can't build into that buffer, we're allowing you to stay within that buffer.
Okay.
The shed and the concrete patio, obviously can be moved. And again, if we grant everyone who has similar issues building on buffers that are protected, then we grant it for you. We've also opened up the doorway for everybody to just start doing this. I mean, it's precedent setting, which is a problem. Those buffers are there, were put there for a reason, whether we agree with them or not. They were there for a reason. They are there, and they exist in other places. And that's why, we sort of, as opposed to rejecting everything, see the need for you to keep the items that would require a complete redo, which is the pool and the patio and the plumbing that goes under the ground. The other things, I know it's unfortunate, but would be a little bit easier to relocate versus moving the entire pool. Right. Do anyone else want to? Mr. Ruggieri, Mr. Brown.
It looks like on the plans that this is a 12 by 8 shed. That is something that can be relocated. A company that installs the sheds, or even some landscapers, can come in with a small forklift, lift it up, and move it anywhere on your yard without destroying it. I've seen other people just jack them up a little bit and put big PVC pipes over, and they're able to push it. Obviously, you have to empty the shed out, but it is something that could be moved and salvaged.
Okay, could I ask you one question? Now, as far as if I can move the shed, there's no way I can put it because it's a buffer all the way, surrounding the whole backyard. So I would have to, I guess, get rid of it if there's nowhere that you guys approve for me to move it to in my yard. If there's somewhere I would
Yeah,
I don't
greatly
have a
move.
suggestion.
Well, I do feel for that. Maybe the property doesn't warrant having a shed then, if you don't have the room for, because you put the pool in. But in order for this board, and I do feel that I have support from my colleagues and the staff recommendation to be able to leave the pool. And, as of right, we could have you take the pool out. And, but you're a resident of the town. You're out here, living here, and we'd rather not go that route.
Okay.
But we do want to see the encroachment into the buffer taken out, and that would clear up the whole back. We're leaving you with the pool equipment that you can screen with the plantings that they spoke about, and then you remove the shed and the concrete. If it's an old shed that was there prior to, maybe it's outlived its life. But if you can't find something somewhere on your property to put it, maybe it's just the property doesn't warrant having a shed. And yeah, sure.
Is there any way you can, I'm sorry. We have all of our things in there. That would be like a huge hardship for us right now. We're retired law enforcement and, we really need the shed.
Property, right?
I'm sorry?
Do you have a garage also?
Yes, the garage, we have my oldest son is deployed in the Navy and we have his car in there so we can keep it off the street while he's gone. So that's why we didn't
Right.
put the second.
So- All right,
And
but
it-
I'm going to give you one opinion from one board member, is that I can't support it staying.
Right.
I will support the recommendation from the planning staff if the shed and the concrete pad are removed. But if it's not, I won't support it. Which means it would be denied with one board member. I don't know what my other colleagues would vote.
Are there further questions or comments from the board? I agree with the staff report. I mean, there's a lot of building that went on in protected area. We looked at it closely. Certainly the pool, patio, the plumbing, and everything that's in there is the most expensive. We don't want you, you're residents of town, we want you to be able to keep that, even though it goes against what was approved. The other two is it's major precedent setting for us that every buffer that is around that against somebody's house or between houses with the rest, we've now approved this. If we then deny the future ones, then we get dragged into court and we lose because we've set a precedent by saying these buffers are no longer protected. That's sort of the problem for us. We can't make one-off exceptions,
I understand.
and then we end up losing in court. We get Article 78 and we end up
Okay,
losing.
just one last question. How long do we have to do all of this? Like,
Yeah, I mean, that can be worked out with planning staff. Yeah, I mean, we're not looking to make you knock it down tomorrow or something like that, obviously,
thanks.
and again,
Okay.
Football season starting.
yeah. I mean, it's unfortunate. We want to work with you. The best that we
Right.
can honestly do without creating a bad precedent for the town would be to protect you with the expensive items that are there, the pool and plumbing.
Okay.
Mr.
As far
Gonzalez?
as the timeline, so everything really just hinges on the pool permit, whatever your building permits are. So, all the engineering aspects as far as the planting and the removal and relocation, that just has to be done before you could get the CO. So, you would just have to stay on top of the building permit and make sure you stay up to date before it expires. But those could always be renewed if necessary.
Okay.
Okay,
Thanks.
is there a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I would make a
Brown.
motion to grant the application based on the staff report, which is the removal of the shed and the concrete pad, the vegetation that they're requesting to be put in around the pool equipment and into the buffer, and leaving the pool and the patio around the pool.
So motion by Mr. Brown to grant the application with the staff recommendation that the shed and the concrete pad be removed, that the plantings as required by planning staff go into place, and that the pool, the patio, and the pool equipment can stay. Is there a second to that motion? And second by Mr. Bruno. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, abstentions, the application is granted.
Thank you.
Thank you. Item 4 on the agenda, Planning Board application, public hearing, Mike McElway, PB 2022-023, south side of Hanson Place, approximately 151 feet east of Montauk Highway, State Route 27A, Sayville, 30 Hanson Place. Applicant requests a modification of covenants and restrictions associated with TC 5090 in order to permit the sale, service, and consumption of alcohol accessory to the restaurant use. Good evening.
Good evening. How are you? My name is Michael McElwee. I'm one of the co-owners of Local Burger Co. We have locations in Bay Shore, Patchogue, Southampton. I'm also one of the co-owners of Sayville Bait and Tackle, which is fairly close proximity to this application as well. I'm here tonight to discuss a future Local Burger location located at the Sayville Falls Mini Golf at 30 Hanson Place, Sayville. We're seeking a removal of the covenant that prohibits alcohol being sold at this location. To give you a little bit of background on Local Burger, we are a family-friendly burger restaurant. Alcohol sales are 10 to 15% of our overall sales. We are not a late-night location. All of our stores close at 10 p.m. on weekdays and 11 p.m. on weekends. We've had a successful relationship with the Southampton Golf Range and Mini Golf since we opened in early summer of 2020. We find that the people who play golf will stop and eat before or after playing, and we found that people who have come to have a burger may end up grabbing a round of mini golf after their meal. It's been a great relationship, and that's why we're here about this Sayville project. The Sayville Falls Mini Golf has approval for a 30-seat restaurant as an accessory to the mini golf. This is exactly what our plan is based on our success in Southampton. The facility has been purchased by the same operator in Southampton, and he's made improvements to the facility to clean up what's been let go over the past few years. Our alcoholic beverage offerings are limited. We serve canned beer, wine, and craft cocktails. We do not serve hard alcohol, shots, etc. Our primary business is burgers, fries, milkshakes, and ice cream. I have copies of our menu too if you want to see, just to get a sampling. On Saturday, we did meet with the neighbors on Hanson Place and the Oak Street, which are the two dead-end streets adjacent to our location. They did express concerns about the hours of operation, noise from the speakers on the mini golf course, and their biggest concern was the parking situation. We addressed our hours of operation. The operator of the mini golf made adjustments to his speakers so that nothing is pointing towards, and it's all down on the mini golf, and they're all turned off by 11 o'clock as well. We explained that we want to be good neighbors and that we respect the fact that these are their homes. Prior to us taking ownership there seems to have been some no parking signs that may or may not have been removed on an application where someone was trying to put a mini self-storage on the property. And we'd like to see the signs reinstalled. I did speak with Tom Owens today, and he's willing to put up some new signs. There's a turning point where there should be a sign that says dead end residents only, so people don't drive down the dead end and then ultimately have no way to turn around but other than using a resident's driveway. So I did speak with him, and he said he would be happy to sit down and address that. As far as the overall parking area and the property itself, so the mini golf and the section that we're looking to do Local Burger is one parcel. The parcel to the north of it towards Main Street was formerly a Long Island Sportsplex. Now it's going to be a pickleball hall. That property was kind of left unmaintained, unlandscaped. The previous owners did some landscaping just before they sold the building. We met with the pickleball people today, and we agreed that we would work together to kind of landscape and really define what is approved parking and what is not approved parking. The area itself has been neglected over the past few years, and we plan to improve that with our new ventures. And I'm happy to answer any questions or concerns you may have.
Thank you. We'll go to public hearing and then come back for questions. I have Vicky, is it Bonagora?
Good evening. Thank you for giving me this time. As Mike said, we did meet prior to this meeting, but there are some things in talking with my neighbors, and we are a very small community, that there are some concerns. Just one of the things that, just for you guys to be aware, that when I was looking up for the agenda to make sure it was the right place, the listing was under the applicant's personal name rather than under Local Burger, so that was a little confusing for me. And I had some concerns with the poorly placed permit application signs. They were not in a very visible place, and we are a very small street. And I was not one of the ones that received written notification. I found out by accident. I guess I wasn't in that buffer zone area that they have to send. Some of my neighbors got notices, but I did not get one. Being that this is a residential neighborhood and we're in proximity to a church, which is Grace Chapel, our one of our very big concerns is opposing the serving of alcohol in the zone that it's adjacent to residential. And in doing some research and looking at the ISLIP code and zoning, it's not permitted to have alcohol being served in a zone that's located adjacent to residential. And that's one of our biggest areas. We are supportive of our local business people. The mini golf course is, that gentleman has done a great job with it. And if you go 200 or 300 feet from the mini golf, you have Bait and Tackle, which is a new in Mike's place that does already serve alcohol and burgers. The no parking signs, I appreciate you looking into that, Mike. Way back when the mini golf was first being brought up to have it built and opened, parking was a serious health and safety issue on that street. Parking was horrendous with the sports complex. There was not an ample parking. They were parking on both sides of the street, which at that point then made it inaccessible to emergency vehicles getting down to the neighborhood part of the street. So no parking signs were put up in that whole stretch in front of the mini golf and the sports complex on Hanson. Why they disappeared over time, I have no idea. They were put up to provide the health and safety and accessibility for emergency vehicles. So how they were removed, why they were removed, we were never even notified or told. And when they were up, patrons were ignoring the signs and parking. And so it made it very concerning for us in the neighborhood. The other concerns are, the hours of operation, which Mike brought up, having a buffer zone of vegetation, consistent maintenance and care of the property year round, and that there be ample parking. And also, like he said, having a sign where traffic doesn't go into the neighborhood area because there is no place to turn around so that we don't have through traffic. But one of our biggest concerns is that we do oppose the serving of alcohol at the restaurant in the neighborhood area. And we were just wondering if there was an approved site plan that we would be able to take a look at in terms of the restaurant. Is that something that's available? Okay, I didn't see that. And just to make mention also, as an aside, back in the time with the original start and plans of the mini golf, we were supposed to have additional lighting, and they were supposed to be paving Hanson and Oak Street. Till this day, we have not had that. And we would really are in dire need of having our roads repaved as well, just to bring it to your attention again.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Those are the only cards I have. Did anyone else come in who did not fill out a card wish to be heard on this application? Not seeing anyone, I'm going to go to Ms. Wozniak to give us a staff report.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The subject property is located on the south side of Hanson Place, approximately 151 feet east of Montauk Highway in Sable, behind the indoor recreation sports complex. It's improved with a mini golf facility with an accessory restaurant and associated outdoor seating, which was granted by the town board under a change of zone application in 2012. Covenants associated with that change of zone prohibited the sale, service, and consumption of alcohol associated with the restaurant. Tonight, the applicant is looking to remove this covenant in order to be able to serve alcohol and provide more options for their customers. The service of alcohol will be accessory to the food service, and other covenants limit hours of operation and size of the restaurant. This use will not be a bar and will only operate accessory to the main mini golf use. It is not anticipated to have a major impact on current operations, but rather just provide additional menu items. Therefore, planning recommends the board grant the application.
Questions for the applicant?
Well, I just have
Mr.
one
Brown.
comment. The comment is, I would not approve a bar at this location, obviously on Hanson Place. It's just a small community back there. But it's just food, golf, that serves beer and wine. So
Yes.
it's not a bar.
It's not, and I invite you to look, if you look at what we do
No,
in our Southampton
I've-
location.
I've been
It's
to
very
some of the
similar.
other locations that, when you went to Bay Shore with Local Burger,
Mhm.
and I've been out to Southampton. I didn't know that was associated with all these places.
Mhm.
And you do run a very clean operation.
And we have no intentions of building a bar. It would be a walk-up window where people would get their drinks, sit at the tables. We're limited to 30 seats in the restaurant. And
Right, and based on the businesses that you run, which I didn't even know that was you that did that, I would concur the same thing. So that would be my opinion, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Further questions from the board? Ms. Cruz?
Is the mini golf year-round, or is,
it is not year-round. So right now, it'll probably run till about November 1st, weather permitting. There is talk, so there is a large field in the back there that was also zoned outdoor recreation. There's talks of potentially bringing ice skating there, which is what they do out in Southampton in the winter months. But it's a lot of work. It's a lot of permitting. It's bringing in an electrical service, and it's probably not in the cards for this year.
Thank you. And Ms. Wozniak, I would just add, I know Mr. McElway said he spoke to the DPW Commissioner, but if we would also, if this is approved tonight, speak to Mr. Owens, Commissioner of DPW. Okay, but just a call about the no parking signs, the dead end sign, and as well as we can raise the issue of the paving of the street. Yeah, that was raised. And then if you can just speak to, I guess there was one comment that was made, whether or not alcohol is permitted to be served adjacent to residential
Yeah,
property.
so it is permitted. I mean, I can give you examples of Farrell's and West Islip that abuts neighborhoods. I could think of, if I came up with it, I'd probably come up with 3 or 4 other. It is permitted because our area is not residential. Like, we're not trying to take a house in the middle of Hanson and build a bar. We're permitted outdoor recreation with an approved restaurant site. There is a stipulation about a 500-foot within a house of worship for liquor. It does not include beer and wine. I did go on the SLA site today and check the application. We are 545 feet from that church,
Right.
so
Well,
we wouldn't
also
fall within
with
the 500.
Great Grace Chapel is located on the other side of the railroad
The other side of
tracks.
the railroad tracks.
It's on the other side of Montauk Highway,
Yes.
and you're really separated from
We're
that.
separated
I'm
from it, but
confident
it
with
does.
that.
So within a 500-foot radius, it would eliminate us, but we're 547 feet from that.
Thank you. I was going to ask the staff to tell us that, but you spoke for the staff. so-
I looked into it today.
Kelly is probably grateful for that. Are there further questions from the board? Anything further from the applicant? Is there a motion?
Mr.
Mr.
Chairman?
Matamore.
Oh, Mr. Matamore?
Just use the microphone. Is a motion by Mr. Matamore to grant the application subject to the covenants and restrictions. You've reviewed the covenants and restrictions?
Yes.
Is there a second to that motion? Second by Ms. Cruz. All in favor? Opposed, abstentions. The application is granted, subject to covenants and restrictions.
Thank you.
If you want, we'll give you a card. Wendy, well, I think Wendy gave you the card. If you have questions, I would reach out to Wendy. Item number 5 on the agenda, Town Board Application Public Hearing, Dynamic Expediting Services, CZ 2022-014, east side of Carlton Avenue, County Route 17, approximately 205 feet south of Manhattan Boulevard, Islip Terrace, 39-41 Carlton Avenue. Applicant requests a modification of covenants and restrictions associated with TC 3533 in order to permit a 4-family dwelling. Good evening, Ms. Trell.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. Roxanne Trella, Dynamic Expediting Services, with offices at 1040 Terry Road, Ronkonkoma, New York. This property was previously zoned Business 1 District until a change of zone was completed in 1987 under Change of Zone Application 87-7 which resulted in covenants and restrictions being placed on the property under TC 3533. The zone was changed to Residence CAA to construct a two-family dwelling. We are here before the board requesting a modification of covenants and restrictions placed in order to permit a four-family dwelling. The covenants and restrictions that we are seeking to modify are numbers 1 and number 3. The portion of number 1 of the covenants and restrictions that we are requesting to modify state that the use of the subject parcel shall be limited to a two-family dwelling and that the dwelling shall be owner-occupied with only one apartment available for rental purposes. The other portion of number 1 states that the front yard setback of the structure shall be 50 feet and the minimum lot area shall be 19,900 square feet. Both of those covenants are being maintained. Number 3 of the covenants and restrictions states that the dwelling should provide a garage with a 2-car capacity. The proposed plan indicates a proposed garage conversion to accommodate an additional living unit consisting of 2 bedrooms, 1 bath, and a kitchen living room combo. A recent amendment to the Town of Islip Code now permits a single 3 or 4 family dwelling when adjacent to a property zoned Residence C, CA, Business District, Business 1, 2, or General Service T, so long as it meets certain requirements. The subject parcel shall also meet the requirements of Code Sections 68-500 and 68-501. The building must have a lobby or a foyer from which all units are accessible and only one visible front entrance. Our proposed plan adheres to those requirements. Section 68-500 states that the architectural requirements, and 68-501 states the site plan requirements. The proposed change to the 4-family dwelling will meet all the requirements of Section 68-500 and requests no variances on that portion. Section 68-501 dealing with the site plan. That section states that a minimum buffer area of 25 feet shall be maintained when adjacent to any residential zone or use, unless the subject use is a single or two-family dwelling. The proposed site plan indicates the ability to maintain a 25-foot buffer to the north and the east of the property. However, it does encroach into the buffer on the south. The property to the south is zoned GST and owned by Options for Community Living. The reason that the proposed site plan shows an encroachment into that buffer is to allow for a 16-foot wide driveway to the rear as access to the parking stalls. Secondly, this code section states that it prefers most of the parking to be in the rear of the dwelling. Our conceptual plan indicates only 2 parking stalls in the front. All remaining stalls are to be located in the rear. The 2 stalls placed in the front yard will bring the front yard occupancy to 39.4%, wherein 35% is permitted. However, it is typical of residential areas to be granted relief to a 40% front yard occupancy. Thirdly, there is a requirement for 15% open rear yard space exclusive of the buffer. Due to the location of the parking stalls in the rear, the plan does indicate that there will only be about 7.2% open space. This amendment was to the code allowing for 3 and 4 family dwellings is the result of a need for alternative housing choices. Its intention is to maintain the residential character of the site while allowing multifamily developments within walking distance of commercial areas. This site seems to be the perfect example of how the code was intended to be used. While it does require a modification of covenants, those covenants were placed on the property 30 years before this new amendment. As the times change, our needs as a community change. The relaxations required seem to be in line with typical relaxations requested for 1-family dwellings. It will not be an undesirable change to the neighborhood, and we do not believe that it will have an adverse impact. If the board has any questions, I'll answer them.
Thank you, Ms. Trella.
Thank you.
I'd say you normally have good applications. This one I have a lot of concerns with, which we're going to come back and talk about.
Okay.
But I want to go to the public first, the neighbors that are here, and then we'll come back for questions and a staff report. I'm going to go to John McKiernan. Joe.
I have I've been a resident of that area, actually a few feet from that house, for 72 years. All the legal mumbo jumbo that was just given here, the property originally was commercial. Back late 60s, early 70s, the property was, they were going to build a gas station. So they tore down all the trees, put in a foundation, and I guess the town finally decided that 5 gas stations were enough for Islip Terrace. So the property laid fallow until somebody came knocking on my door. I have the property adjacent next door to their property. I sold my house about 10 years ago to my daughter. I lived with her in the same house. The house was never owner occupied. It did stipulate because they came to me. I would have preferred an office building. From my perspective, the people would come and go between approximately 7 and 7. Now, what came about was the house had the codicil stating that it should be owner occupied. It was never owner occupied. Okay? After whatever came about with that, all of a sudden, there's 20 people living in the house. There's approximately 10 to 15 cars on the front lawn. Islip Terrace was a small hamlet. It was a nice little town, but it seems to be the forgotten town. And it doesn't need to be made as an example for bringing more and more people into our area. The noise during the summertime especially was music. It would start between 9 and 10 in the morning, and it could run until 2 a.m. the following morning. This was constantly going on. And as I say, the bottom line is the house was occupied by 20 plus people. And Islip Terrace doesn't want a main street with housing of that nature. We're a small community. We want to stay that way. We don't need 20 or 40 people. Oh, and by the way, the house next door is owned by the same people, and it's the identical house. So we'll probably be up here again once they get this pushed through, if they get away with it. And that's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you. James McKiernan.
Good evening. From my understanding, there is no precedent for a 4-family in this area. This house has been a problem. He violated all the laws and the codes to begin with. He should not be rewarded for this. Like my uncle had said, we had MS-13 in our backyards. Multiple fights, late parties, and excuse me, and gunshots. We don't want it. And like he said, he'll try to do the same thing with the house next door.
Thank you. Gerald Rooney.
Hi, I've been living in the neighborhood since 1986. I was there when they built those 2 houses. They were supposed to be owner occupied. As the other gentleman said, they never were. I understand there's a need for housing, and I respect the man's, business, trying to own businesses and rent them out. But I do believe that he does have a pattern of disregarding the zoning laws of the town. The one house was, the house we're talking about, did burn down, and it had way too many people in it. And now you want to give a zoning to have more people. I respect the fact that he's trying to do it legally now. And if the town could enforce that and just have it 4 families and not 8 families, and, you know, that would probably be all right with me. But, you know, it is a busy neighborhood. It's a busy road, and it is commercial. There is a need for housing. But I do have concerns. One of mine was parking, but they did mention that you're going to do parking in the back. And my other concern is the garbage. I didn't know that there was MS-13 in shooting, but I do hear the music. I live next door, and I hear the music, and I have to confer there is music constantly, Spanish music. Luckily, my wife is Spanish, so I'm used to it. But I do believe that there should be some concern for the neighbors and a little respect for the neighbors and keep it clean. You know, there is a lot of garbage and garage sales and way too many people. In the one house, I live next to the house. So there's 2 houses that he owns. And I've met the owner. He's a nice man and he's a businessman. He's, you know, he put a lot of money into the house. Like I said, I do respect that. And the fact that he's trying to do it legally now, but I have concerns because of the prior disregard for the zoning. You know, it's like giving someone a hunting license that's been irresponsible with guns, you know? So, I mean, that's ultimately up to you, but you're hearing a lot of the neighbors not happy with the current situation. And, you know, I definitely am concerned that the town is not going to be able to enforce the zoning laws. They have not been able to do it in the past. The house that I live next to, which is his other house, as the people said, there's a lot of people living there, a lot of cars. I don't know how many families are living there. I try to be friendly with my neighbors. I've never reported anything or made a complaint, you know. So I just have a lot of concerns about this. That's why I wanted to come and see. I'm glad they're doing the parking in the back, though. That's good. But the garbage, there should be a dumpster or something. What are you gonna do with all this garbage? Just the 1-2 family, there's garbage pails all over the place.
Thank you. I have Mary Skelly and Catherine Schmidt, or? Oh, okay. Okay, so Ms. Kelly, go ahead.
Okay. You guys have been wonderful with what you've done in Central Islip, but you've killed Islip Terrace with traffic. Everything on the north side of Southern State Parkway has been planned community multi-use, whether it was the baseball or all of those condo places you have. But there's only 2 arteries. I've lived on the same piece of property, it's been in my family since 1922. So, and my father only died last year at 99. So we've watched the evolution in Islip Terrace and we love it. I mean, I raised my kids there. I'm still there. I've got 2 properties that butt up against this one that was the sensational fire of Islip Terrace a couple of years ago because it had 20 people coming in. Now, you guys have, again, you've done all of your multi-use north of Southern State, and we basically were cool with that until the traffic started coming. We've already got 6 lights from Southern State Parkway to Sunrise Highway, and you can't get across the street. What are you going to do? You're going to give us maybe 10 lights so that every block there's another one? Because nobody can get out anymore. This particular house in question is on Carlton Avenue. They say there's a 50-foot setback. That's baloney. It might be 50 foot, but the guy rented it to Hurricane Sandy contractors years ago. There were cars all over the place because he didn't care if they slept on the floor, in a tent, or wherever. Now, the backyard that you're just telling us that you're going to put parking in, well, that's only 100 feet from 2 homes that are owned by us that 3 years ago, we spent $7,000 to cut the lot in the middle so it would be permanently affixed to number 6 and number 10 so that the flavor of the community would stay the same. So while you guys are letting everybody slice and dice buffer zones and parking and shove them, The poor kids sitting here, I've known most of these people my entire life. You're going to basically give backyard parking to a house that literally is maybe 30 feet from now what's going to be a parking lot? They didn't buy that for that. We're not in Islip Terrace because we hate the place. Let us have this dignity of not starting a precedent for Queens. We're not Queens. You can keep Queens on the other side of Northern State Parkway with the courthouses and all of that, and we're fine with that. But there's no way for you to improve the traffic coming from north of it to Sunrise Highway. You guys know it. We know it. And you're killing us because it's amazing that nobody else has gotten broadsided trying to make a left-hand turn during rush hour. So please don't start a precedent that we really don't deserve. Thank you.
Thank you. Mike Buxer.
For you. Other than 25 Carlton Avenue, thank you for hearing me. The house in question was burned down February of 2020. I was standing there during the time of the fire, during which the firemen were asking the residents how many people were in the house. The residents said 3 families. It turned out to be 8 families, over 18 people in the house. This is not a place for a multifamily unit. 2 families, owner occupied. That's the way it's been. I'm here 22 years. That's the way it's been ever since I've been here. I own a legal 2-family, and it's only my family living in it. I want to keep it that way. Neighbors, they're all the same. I had a next door neighbor on the other side of me that had 7 families living in the house at one time. They eventually got evicted. We had a dog and rat and mouse issue that infested my yard, which we had to pay over $2,000 to have that exterminated. So I'm asking you to please deny this application. 2-family, fine, no issues. 4 families, this is not an apartment building. This is a residential neighborhood. Thank you.
Thank you. I have Keith Miller.
I'll make this quick and to the point. My name is Keith Miller. I lived at 36 Carlton Avenue for 69 years. My parents lived there for over 90 years. I also am a commissioner in Islip Terrace Fire Department, so I'm here on board with the fire department and living across the street. I work for Islip Town Code Enforcement. I work for Southampton Police Department Code Enforcement. I work for New York State Courts Enforcement. Okay, first thing is, there was 21 people living in that house across the street that burned. It was on November 28th, 2020, because we seen the house burn from across the street. Half the people that were in that house lived in the basement. There was only supposed to be 2 families in there. There was approximately 8 families living in that house. The only reason why the people got out of the basement, and we were already flooding it with water from the snorkels and the back, the only reason they came out of the basement was because the water was coming down. Nobody told them. Nobody in that house knew who lived in there, okay? Even the cable guy says there's like 6 families in there because there's 6 separate cables, 6 stoves. Okay, anyway, getting back to the point. A legal 2-family house, we would go with. 4-family, which they've already started. They've already sectioned off the garage. They put egress in the basement. But there is no, if I remember correctly, there is no basement apartments in the town of Islip. Am I correct? I'm gonna ask this back. Okay, we don't want 4-family houses. And if I'm correct, also 4-family houses require sprinkler systems. And that, that's just like over in the condos that they have over by Sunrise Highway. 4-family houses need sprinkler systems. Number one is, who is going to regulate what goes on in this house? Who is going to foresee how many people or how many families they get in the basement? Who is going to live in the garage? We had to break down the garage door in order to get in there. We didn't even know there was an apartment in there. I live across the street. I didn't know there was an apartment there. I knew they were in the basement. And the same thing, God forbid, the next door house is the same way. There's 6 families living in that house. I know. There's got to be at least 30 people in that house with kids and everything else. But nobody's enforcing anything there. And the same thing with across the street, more than 35% of the front yard. It's not grass, it's all stone. I got pictures. I will gladly send you pictures of what goes on over there, how many cars are over there. I have pictures of the old house that burnt down with all the amount the gentleman was saying when they had that hurricane. They had cars all over the place, all over the lawns. They still do. Okay. And nobody lives there and they still have cars all over the place and all over the lawn. It's coming from his house next door. Okay. The only thing I suggest is keep it as a legal two-family. When it was owner occupied, I'd like to know myself from working for the codes for the town of Islip. I know a lot of gentlemen, a lot of people in the town of Islip, and a lot of judges from the town of, from New York State courts. They always ask me the same questions. How does somebody get away with owning 2 houses that are owner occupied? That's pretty good. That is really pretty good. Okay. I mean, I can see people, we see it all. We used to see it in the courts all the time. People put it in 2 separate houses, 2 separate names, and they still own the same house. Okay. I'm not having a problem with that. The problem that we're having is too many people in one house, not only for me living across the street and everything that goes on over there. Like the gentleman said, that was very true. The gunshots, the MS-13 member, because I know I belong to the police department, and all the stuff that went on in that house. I mean, I don't think any one of you would like this house next to you, okay? The whole thing is 4 families is too much. I understand that the gentleman's paying, and the one gentleman here said he is a very nice guy, okay? I have no problem. But it's just like saying, I can't afford the house unless I put extra apartments in it. Then don't buy the house or sell it. We don't need parking in the back of somebody's house. We need the driveway that's there. They parked on the lawn all the time because there's not enough parking, and you can't park on Carlton Avenue. That's a fact. Okay. I don't have too much more to say. It's just that on the fire side, we worry about what goes on in these houses. We understand that the new house does have egress from the basement, but why? Is there going to be an apartment in there? That we haven't checked out, but we know there's 2 other apartments that have been built in that house. Okay. And of course, obviously, if they're already started, I guess they got your approval ahead of time, I'm sure, or something, because something is not right here that they go. And as far as the entrance to it, there's no foyer in there. There's 2 separate doors in the front. One goes to the upstairs, one goes to the downstairs to the back. I know, I've been in the house. I've been in the house with the building inspector, and I've been in the house when it had the fire. And the next day after the fire, and I mean the very next day, the morning, because the house was burnt on November 28th. On November 29th,
Mr. Miller, I'm just going to ask you to sort of start wrapping up on this.
okay, the gentleman who owned the house didn't want the insurance company to know how many people were living there. He had a dumpster and guys come in, what about 30 guys, take all the refrigerators and the stoves, which they must have took out. At least 8 or 9 stoves and refrigerators that were in the thing. So how do you have that many stoves and stuff? I have pictures of that too. So I'm just saying, it's going to go back to the way it was. It's not going to stay. It's a beautiful looking house. You want to leave it as a 2-family house? That's fine. That's about it. I'm talking in reference to all the neighbors feel the same way. We've lived there for years.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Kathleen McKiernan?
Good evening. Guys, listen, 44 years, that's how long I've been living there. Bought the house from my dad. I'm the buffer. You have the map in front of you. I'm 55 Fisher. 16 Leland cypresses. You were talking earlier about like landscape buffering. 6 o'clock on November, early morning, my daughter came in to me. Her throat was bothering her. She wants to go to the doctor. Breast on the couch, 75 feet, popping, gunshots going off. I don't want Suffolk County pulling in my driveway because from their angle of their illegal deck, it was all out of code, everything. You guys can't enforce it. None of you can enforce this. It's horrible. Now, I had so much to say listening to everyone talk. I could butt in and say it. It's disgusting. He might be a nice gentleman. He might be trying to do the right thing and make some money because we know it's bad times, but that's just it. It's bad times. It's really, There's no way to enforce it. I'm sitting here watching a house burn on fire. Look at the map. Look at my property. You know? Flames. The same people that were living in that house just went next door. That's all they did. So whatever they counted, the head count was, that's not what I saw from my yard. They were fleeing over to the property next door. Now, had I thought of this, I mean, would I have purchased the house from my dad? No. Is that it? Should I move? It's a winning battle. That's my concern. I'm beyond frustrated. I'm the buffer of everybody else's property. And on top of that, we just mentioned the house next door on Colton Avenue that they all went to. All of a sudden, there's a garage sale every weekend blocking Colton Avenue. There's cars lined up on Colton Avenue. Do I have to get foils from Suffolk to see how many times, the cops were called, or even town code enforcement? As a matter of fact, I called the town attorney, Mr. Canova, just a few days before the house fire. It was really ironic. Anyhow, I don't know how much more frustrated I could be with knowing how much I'm paying in property tax, and this is what I get to live with. I'm talking a spotlight that is like aimed up and right in the windows. I got to get up and go to work too. So I guess that's all I have to say. Thanks.
Thank you. Those are all the cards I have. Anyone else wish to be heard on the application who did not fill out a card? Not seeing anyone, I'm going to ask Mr. Colgan to give us a report, then we're going to come back for questions.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. Stated by the applicant, this application proposes converting an approved two-family dwelling into a four-family dwelling. Prior to this, the property and the one to the immediate north had been the subject of a change of zone back in 1987 for two-family dwellings. The units, as per the covenants, were required to be owner-occupied, and that was discussed considerably on the record at that time. The garage was further required to have a two-car capacity and not to be converted into other uses. 3 and 4 family dwellings were recently added to the Residence CAA district when adjacent to specific commercial zones. This property is eligible for the higher density as the property to the south is zoned Business 1, subject to the board authorizing the change in covenants. The conceptual site plan shows 7.2% open area in the rear yard, where 15% is required, and 60.6% open space in the front yard instead of the 65% required, and one additional parking stall than what is required by code. Variances would be needed from the Zoning Board of Appeals for having half of the required open space in the rear yard unless this board requests changes to the proposed site plan. The building elevations are contextual with the surrounding area and appear to meet the code requirements. The staff's concern is the amount of pavement to meet the parking and how much that diminishes the residential character and quality of life for the tenants, particularly for the rear yard. A 3-family dwelling would conform more to the zoning requirements with less pavement and more passive space for the on-site tenants to enjoy. We have received an email this morning indicating alleged zoning violations prior to the filing of this application, with news articles stated that as many as 19 residents lived in 8 different apartment units in the subject building. Effective covenants preventing overcrowding would be essential to preserve public safety and preclude overparking on the property should the board grant the application. We did hear a lot of comments tonight, so the staff would suggest that the board reserve decision to review those prior to bringing this back.
Mr. Trella, I guess my first question is, prior to the fire and on the neighboring property, currently, does the owner live in one of those units?
He is here. I could ask him, but I do not believe that he does.
Okay. So you know that would be in violation then of the covenants
Correct.
on the property. And so generally, when you're in violation of the covenants, even coming before us is usually an automatic denial. We don't want to consider applications where you're not following it. Was the subject dwelling ever subdivided into 8 units at the time of the fire or prior to the fire?
I did just speak with the owner. What he stated was that the fire did occur in November and that it occurred on Thanksgiving. which is why there were so many people present at the time. He stated that there was no apartment in the basement and that there were only 2 living additional units, so 2 total, and that there was not a basement. Again, this is what I was told. I was not there personally 2 years ago, so I cannot say personally.
We'll accept that as your statement on the record. Whether or not we accept that as the truth is another issue. Why is the garage proposed to be converted into living space?
The units have to have a livable unit size of 900 square feet. So in order for the 4th dwelling unit to comply with that 900 square feet, we need the square footage from the garage.
Can you speak to, there are open violations on the property, there were some from the fire, but prior to the fire, occupancy issues on the current property as well as the neighboring property? Are you saying that those were issued in error?
As of right now, the property has been vacant since the fire.
They're from prior to the fire,
Uh,
those violations for the...
Prior to the fire, I was not involved in the project.
Can you also speak to the fact that even if we were to consider the application, that you don't even meet the open space requirement in the rear?
I did speak with the owner about it. We do require 15%. We're about half of that right now. There is a big deck on the rear of the property. So I spoke to them. There are going to be sliding doors there. If we reduce the size of the deck to just be kind of staircases like what we have here that meet the building code, I think we could bring that 7% significantly up.
So, I mean, from my perspective, I would not support this application in any way, shape, or form, and I'll give you the reasons as to why I would not after the other board members speak. What I am more concerned about tonight, and this is sort of opening Pandora's box, is that the applicant would bring this application this evening with the open violations on both property without being owner-occupied and subjecting all these members of the community, as they stated this evening, to the conditions that they've been subjected to. They bought residential houses. There was a change of zone that was approved subject to covenants and restrictions that allowed that to become the 2-family that it is now, owner-occupied, which from all indications, it's not been owner-occupied. I would even go beyond what I'll say later, is certainly asking Mr. Colgan and the town planning staff to speak to code enforcement as to why those open violations are still in existence and have not been enforced, and to find out both the neighboring property and that property. But I'm going to turn it over to board members first to see if they have any questions or concerns, and then I'll come back to the reasons why I will not approve this or even reserve a decision on it. Mr. Bruno, going to go first.
Ms. Trella, I have to agree with the chairman. My biggest problem with it from a purely planning perspective is that when I look at it, the very nature of having the 4 units and having the park in the backyard takes away from the residential character. You can have a 2-family house and it feels residential and it fits in the neighborhood. When you start needing to park in the backyard, you're not just parking in your backyard. You're parking adjacent to the neighbors' yards. And so it's not what I think neighbors expected or would consider residential in nature. So for that reason, I have difficulties with the application.
Thank you. Ms. Frujari?
I'm going to say that I have to concur with my fellow board members. I think this application would create a dangerous precedent in the area, and I think the applicant has zero credibility. He has already blatantly violated the owner-occupied status. The whole story about Thanksgiving, I'm not going to question it, but we've also had testimony that there's cars parked all over the lawn, not only on Thanksgiving Day, but throughout the year. So that leads me to believe that this house has had multiple families and an overcrowded situation and an unsafe situation for many, many years. So I have to echo my fellow board members in not approving this application.
Mr. Brown?
Yes, Mr. Chairman. Whenever we get these applications, as all the applications tonight, I always ask myself, like the last application we had on Hanson Place, if I lived there, what would I want to see? And I try to put myself in the neighbor's shoes. And right now, the property is zoned. It's 4-family, but it's 2-family because of the covenants and restrictions. which owner occupied, I have no problem with that in this neighborhood. I think that does fit. But to go to a four-family, I could not support that based on the track record of the applicant that we have here tonight. So that's what I wanted to put on record, and I'm going to turn it back to the chairman.
I'm going to go to Ms. Cruz, then Mr. Matamore.
Okay, so going to say exactly what they said. When I first saw it, I was already disappointed that say he didn't live here, but he didn't even keep up his own property that he owns, and he's trying to pack with so many other families. Not only is he putting those families at risk, he's putting the neighbors at risk. And I just think the parking in the back is a terrible idea. Again, also because, you have other neighbors, and to be going back there and parking, and if you already have a big deck back there, that seems to be a very big problem as well. So yeah, I just find this to be that he wasn't very a good owner, because he never kept up with his property. He never made sure that those tenants, followed the code, made sure that they didn't park. Even in some of the pictures that we saw, they're literally parking on the fence line with the other neighbor, which I thought was, something of an eyesore. I can't imagine every time they parked in there and, this neighbor had to deal with those lights because they're parking on on the grass. I just find this to be not something I can support, and it's too big.
Thank you. Mr. Matamore?
I can echo what my associate to my right just mentioned, but one thing that I see, and my background is mostly zoning over the years, and it strikes me that it's not in keeping with the nature and character of Islip Terraces. And particularly, I'm noticing it's 20,000 square foot parcel. So if you would just do an analysis of Islip Terrace, and if this would have be approved, would it come anywhere close to the average 5,000 square foot per parcel that it should, if it's going to fit the nature and character of this neighborhood, which sort of is another way of saying, or the way Maurice O'Connell used to say, it's putting 10 pounds of cement in a 5-pound bag, was his favorite expression. Well, that's just sort of the same analogy here. And we're all touching on it. We're putting too much in too small space, and the neighbors are echoing that. And I think there's justification to support that concept that it's just too much. Thank you.
Ms. Trello, would you like to add anything?
Yes. I guess the first thing that I would like to address is the parking in the rear. That is a specific requirement of this code, section 68-150. Section B says that all parking shall be located to the greatest possible extent in the rear yard area, which is why it was proposed that way. Should the parking in the rear be the main issue, we are willing to go back to the engineer and see if there's a way to configure the parking to the front yard, with minimizing the impact then on the front yard occupancy. So the rear yard parking was placed there specifically to meet a code requirement that was recently added. As far as the safety of the units there, we are proposing an open basement. I know that one of the neighbors had a concern about the egress window. There will be no exterior cellar entrances. This will not be an additional living unit. It is one open space just for a laundry area. Being that this is going to be a 4-unit, we will rental permits. Code enforcement does regulate rental permits. We can have them come and do yearly inspections to confirm that the amount of people that are living there are supposed to be there and that there's not an excess. I also spoke to the client about the excess of vehicles. It seems that he also has been complaining to the town about a neighbor across the street, a tire auto place that seems to park on his lot, especially since it's been vacant since 2020. So I think that there were problems in the past. He is trying to address them. As far as him coming before the board, having the owner occupied requirement, unfortunately, my client wasn't aware that he had to live in the property. When he came to us, it was the first time he even heard that there was a covenant on the property. Now I know he bears the responsibility as the property owner, but purchasing a home, two homes right next to each other, as someone said, that both required to be owner occupied, you would think there would be a safeguard in place saying you can't buy these two because you're supposed to live in one of them. Unfortunately, he was not aware. So he does have violations. He's trying to clear them up. And one way we're trying to clear them up is coming before the board, clean up the property, maintain the landscaping, conform to all of the regulations of the amendment to the code. Like I said, if the parking in the rear is not going to stay within the character and nature, we have no problem going back to the engineer to see if we can come up with a different compromise that would work. But I do respectfully request that the board reserve decision, allow us to speak with planning, allow us to speak with the engineers, and see if we can come back with a more amendable application.
So, Ms. Trella, sir, Ms. Trella, just to go through, I heard everything you said. I mean, obviously you bear a responsibility when you purchase property to go through the covenants, restrictions, and everything that runs along with the property. They were purchased that way. I've not heard from you this evening that even if we're only on one of the properties, that he plans on moving into one of those properties if this were to be approved. Does he plan on making this his residence, one of those properties?
I can speak with him and ask him. I personally do not know, but he is here tonight and I can ask him.
Right. Are you asking us to remove the owner occupancy restrictions on both properties?
We're only here for this property tonight, and we would like that covenant removed on this property.
I mean, I've not heard anything tonight. He certainly doesn't live in any of the units from the information I have from you this evening. I have real concerns about this based upon what the community has said this evening. They should not be subject to and/or living in a residential community that has open violations like this. These open violations on the current property predate the fire on that property and still remain open violations. There are open violations on the neighboring property as well, which have not been addressed. That is a major concern. To even come before the board, you don't need this board to approve this application in order to clear up those violations. There's nothing that cannot be cleared up without us doing it. You could clear those up immediately without us doing anything. So there's no need to come before us to get those violations cleared up, as was stated on the record. I've seen nothing to clear up those violations. I do not like myself even considering applications when there are open violations that are just being ignored. In this case, I think the existing covenants and restrictions are appropriate and were imposed to minimize adverse impacts and to protect the neighboring residential properties and further intensification of the original rezoning. The prior approval, as I said, was subject to certain covenants and restrictions that were voluntarily agreed to and necessary in order to grant the original change of zone on that property. The current covenants are not being followed, as we heard this evening. The current owner, as I've been told so far this evening, lives off-site, and I've heard no credible testimony submitted that the owner plans on moving into one of the units. Certainly can ask that question and get an answer for us and state it on the record if you'd like. But for all those reasons, I would move that this application be denied this evening.
Can I have a moment to confer with my client?
You can certainly get an answer to that question, but there is a motion. Before I call, is there a second to that motion? The second by Mr. Moriarty. Before I call the vote, would you like to state anything else or confer with your client?
I just would like to ask him if he would like to, if he does plan on moving on to the property in the future. And I would like to also state that we can have inspections by code enforcement and clear up those violations. If we're given the opportunity, I will call tomorrow morning and schedule inspections and get them cleared up.
Certainly welcome to add anything to the record before I call the vote if you'd like to.
Chairman, while we're
Mr.
waiting for an answer, can I ask Mr. Colgan a question? Sean, the nature and character of this community is it mostly single-family homes surrounding this, with the exception of some commercial property across the street?
Yeah, we haven't done an exhaustive search, but all of it is owned single family,
All single family.
predominantly, certainly to the east.
Are there any four-family units in this area?
We'd have to look, but if there were, they'd probably be very old, non-conforming buildings that, this area of Islip Terrace, they have smaller lots that, generally speaking, it's difficult to park.
So going to
Four-family
what
dwellings?
Mr. Matamore said before, this application is not in keeping with the nature and character of this area. Is that
Certainly the
correct?
immediate area, that's correct.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Trump.
So I just conferred with my client. I would just like to add that there isn't any precedent because this was a recent code amendment. So there wouldn't be for something this new. As far as Mr. Colgan's earlier report where he stated that he believed that a 3-family would be more amendable than a 4-family, I did speak with the client. They are willing to reduce it to the 3-family and keep the garage as a garage, which would hopefully reduce the need for the amount of parking. We can remove it from the rear, bring it all to the front. But for this property, he would like the owner-occupied covenant to be removed because he does not want to move to this property.
So maybe I missed, I was talking to Ms. Colgan. So the owner will move to the property?
Not to this property. No.
Okay. So I think you've answered the question. I think that further supports one of the reasons why I've stated on the record for denial of it. I know Mr. Colgan did mention a 3-family. I would not, from what I've heard this evening in the nature and character community, I would not even support a 3-family in that location. And to be honest with you, we'll call the vote first, but the 2-family needs to be enforced as an owner occupied in order to stay there. But there's a motion and a second on the motion. All in favor? Aye. Opposed, abstention, the motion is denied. And I would just ask Mr. Colgan, not for you, but just certainly for the record, that you follow up and I follow up as well with the town attorney as well as the Commissioner of Public Safety to find out the status of these open violations for the neighbors that live in the community.
Mr. Chairman, can I,
Mr. Brown.
for a point for the record also is, with the application being denied, that means the property is still zoned 2-family owner occupied.
Correct.
I'd like to see that enforced.
And I will ask Mr. Colgan to do that. I've done that already, and I will certainly follow up with the town attorney as well as the Commissioner of Public Safety on those open violations. Thank you.
Thank you.
Next item on the agenda, site plan modification decision item, Southside Hospital, SP 2022-047, north side of Union Boulevard, County Route 50, 366 feet west of North Montgomery Avenue, Bay Shore, 1933-1963, Union Boulevard. Applicant requests a parking relaxation in connection with the change of use from professional office to medical office. Good evening, Mr. DiNicola.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. Appearing on behalf of the applicant, Eugene L. DiNicola, 200 Railroad Avenue, Sayville, New York. The applicant is requesting a parking relaxation.
Mr. DiNicola, 1 second. If I just everyone on the way out to please be quiet and not speak till you get outside. Thank you.
The applicant is requesting a parking relaxation in conjunction with a change of use for the building known as number 1963 Union Boulevard, Bay Shore. In the notice, they mention they use 1933. There are 2 buildings on this property with 1 tax map. I think it is in the process of being corrected so that the address of the single tax map will be 1933-1963. Again, there are 2 buildings on the property. We are now dealing with 1963 Union Boulevard. The subject site is located on the north side of Union Boulevard, 365 feet west of North Montgomery Avenue, Bay Shore. The site has a width on Union Boulevard of 276, almost 277 feet, and contains 58,185 square feet or 1.33 acres. Erected on the site, as I have indicated, are 2 buildings, numbered 1933 and 1963 Union Boulevard. The site contains 47 parking stalls servicing the 2 buildings presently. 1933 Union Boulevard contains a warehouse and office space and requires 22 parking stalls. 1963 Union Boulevard is occupied for regular professional office space only and requires 24 parking stalls. Thus, the total parking stalls required for the two existing uses is 46. The applicant, Southside Hospital, which is the fee title owner of this property, wishes to convert 1963 Union Boulevard from regular office use to medical office use. The conversion of 1963 Union Boulevard to medical office will increase the number of parking stalls for that use to 32.51, and therefore increasing the total number of parking stalls required for both buildings to 53 parking stalls. This change will cause a 6 parking stall deficit, or approximately 11.32%, for which the applicant is seeking relief. Now, the subject site is across Union Boulevard from the main hospital campus of South Shore University Hospital, where additional parking is available for employees of the medical practice that will occupy this building, including the approximate 1,000 space parking garage. The on-site parking relaxation is within range of previous parking relaxations granted, and the applicant has access, as I have indicated, to additional parking facilities across Union Boulevard at the hospital's main campus. The applicant has agreed to site plan modification conditions, which have been signed, and I believe they have been delivered to Mr. Gonzalez. I have the original condition signed. I sent him a copy, which I will deliver today, tomorrow, something like that. I would respectfully request, Mr. Chairman, members of the board, that the applicant, that this board grant the applicant's parking relaxation as requested. If there are any
Thank you,
questions.
Mr. Nicole. I'm going to go to Mr. Gonzalez for a report. I'm going to leave you with a question when we come back. I'd like to know if the owner lives. I'm just kidding. I'm going to go to Mr. Gonzalez for a report.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This Business 1, Industrial 1, split-zoned 1.3-acre property, as Mr. DiNicola stated, is currently improved with 2 buildings, a little over a 7,100 square foot warehouse, and a almost 4,900 square foot professional office. These were constructed as part of the approved SP 2016-038, which also had planning board action for buffer, drainage, and other items. The proposal tonight is to change the use of the professional office building to a medical office. Subsequent to that prior site plan approval, the warehouse parking calculation for the town was changed from one stall per 600 square feet to the now 1 stall per 1,000 square feet. That, paired with the proposed change to medical office, the result is only a 7 stall requirement increase. The site was already overparked by 1 stall, so the relaxation is only a total of 6. As the request is minor in nature, and the hospital now has the parking garage that Mr. DiNicola referred to across the street for any overflow parking if it's necessary, which isn't anticipated. The relaxation request does have merit. So based on that, staff recommends the board grant the application subject to the attached conditions.
Any questions for the applicant? Is there a motion?
Mr. Chairman,
Mr. Brown?
based on the staff report, I'm going to make a motion that we close the hearing, which we already did, I guess, last time, and grant the application.
Motion by Mr. Brown to grant the application subject to the covenants and restrictions, second by Ms. Cruz. I saw a hand down there. All in favor? Opposed? Abstentions? The application is granted. Ms.
Thank you,
DiNicola, in the
Chairman, members of
future,
the board. Have a good evening. I'm
in the
sorry,
future, let us know when you're here. We'll get you up before the long ones when you have a short application like that. Last item on the agenda, Juan Pacheco, CAD Signs, PB 2022-016, southwest corner of North Research Place and Carlton Avenue, County Route 17, Central Islip, 20 North Research Place. Applicant requests a planning board approval for signage in the PDDRS district pursuant to 68-324C3A. I see the applicant is not here, so I'm going to go to Ms. Wozniak for a report.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The subject tenant is located in the retail building that is attached to the larger Home Depot store in the Central Islip Town Center shopping area located off Carlton Avenue in the CIPDD. In this sub-district, signage requires approval from the planning board. Tonight, T-Mobile is looking to update their current signage and is proposing 2 flush-mounted channel letter facial signs as shown on the submitted sign drawings. The channel letter signage type is consistent with the other tenant signage on the building, and the applicant has moved the location of the side sign to the sign box as requested by planning to make it more contextually compatible with the building facade. Based on this, planning recommends the board approve the signage as shown on the latest plan submitted.
Ms. Wozniak, Ms. Brown, do we have a copy of those signs or an image of them? Are there any questions? Is there a motion? Ms. Cruz, I saw a hand down there, yes. Oh, see the trouble I'm creating for you?
Almost spelled it. I know. I make a motion to grant the application based on staff's report.
Motion by Ms. Cruz to grant the application. Is there a second? By Mr. Moriarty, all in favor? Opposed, abstentions, the application is granted.
Mr. Chairman, I make a motion
Yes.
to close the meeting.
Motion by Mr. Brown to adjourn the meeting. Is there a second? Second by Mr. Bruno, all in favor? Opposed, abstentions, we are adjourned. Thank you.